Be selfish. Not with everything, not necessarily with your time, your attention, what you're willing to give other people, your resources. Be selfish with your values. Protect the principles that define who you are and who you're trying to be. You can compromise without betraying yourself. You can help somebody without taking responsibility for their outcomes as a result of their choices. You can forgive someone and still not give them access to you, at least the same access to you. You can disappoint somebody and still treat them with a lot of respect. Those are the differences between sacrifice and self-abandonment. Sacrifice is something you choose because it expresses one of your values. You can give up comfort because you value love. You can give up time because you value loyalty. You can accept inconvenience because you value responsibility or service. And self-abandonment is quite a bit different. It happens when you feel like something's important because you're afraid of conflict or rejection or guilt, judgment, disapproval, blame. And you're no longer giving because the choice reflects those values necessarily. You might be giving because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. Your values are a principle that guide how you live, inform your actions. Your behaviors are an expression of your values. They answer questions like, what matters to me? What's important to me? What kind of person do I want to be? Who do I want to become? What am I unwilling to betray in myself? Maybe you value honesty, discipline, self-respect, courage, kindness, freedom. There's a bunch of values. They're important because they give you standard for your decision making. And without those standards, your choices usually become driven by whatever emotion comes up in the moment: fear, comfort, desire, pressure, approval, convenience, validation. Values help you produce better outcomes. They improve the quality and consistency of your decisions. For example, if you value health, you'll probably be eating in a way that expresses that, and you'll be working out, and you'll consider how you feel physically as a priority. If you value discipline, you're more likely to keep going after inspiration wanes and motivation's gone. If you value honesty, you're more likely to build trust. If you value courage, you're more likely to act while you're scared. It's important to understand values don't necessarily guarantee an outcome. You can act with courage and still fail. You can tell the truth and still lose a relationship. You can work with discipline and still have bad luck. Values don't control outcomes necessarily, but they influence them indirectly by how you show up when things get tough. They give you control over how you meet them. It's important to understand values are a little bit different than goals. Goals are basically outcomes, something I want to achieve. Values is the standard you use while you pursue the goal. It's how you show up in pursuit of the thing that you desire. If building a strong body is a goal, health and discipline are probably your values. If building a business is a goal, independence, courage, creativity, agency, those are probably values. Your values determine basically how you move forward in pursuit of your outcomes. And they aren't just words. They aren't just a series of adjectives that you choose off of a pull-down list. You kind of find out what your values are by experience. Lots of trial and error. They start from what you're taught when you're a little kid, what you admired in other people. For example, I thought my father hung the moon when I was a kid. He was a badass, Navy SEAL, Vietnam, did all the things. And then as I got older and wiser, I realized that, underneath that veneer of the tough guy was a very insecure, very troubled man, and who was unwilling to face that part of himself. And that carried with him, that insecurity, that tough guy persona carried with him to his death. And along the way, as I was growing up, I pursued a value that I call courage, which is a willingness to show up when shit gets hard and when you got to look trouble in the eyes, and in a lot of cases that trouble was me, and so I had to look myself in the eyes and I had to face it. And along the way I lost a lot of respect for my father, and over time our relationship basically became non-existent. And I didn't choose that. It wasn't uncomfortable. It basically happened as an expression of my values, as an example. You can start looking for your values by looking backward. What are the things that made you most proud? What are the principles that you were expressing that in those moments? What did it feel like to be ashamed or disappointed or out of alignment with yourself? The things that came up when you, after they happened, you lost respect for yourself. What value did you violate? What qualities do you admire in other people? What behavior makes you angry? What kind of reactions reveal the kind of people and principles that matter to you? And just, it's important to understand that identifying those values is just the beginning. You have to, you don't just develop courage by saying, I'm courageous now. Courage is my value. It actually happens acting while you're afraid. You don't develop discipline overnight. You can admire disciplined people, the David Goggins and the Jocko Willings of the world that just talk about discipline over and over again. That's great. But you actually develop discipline by doing hard things when it feels like you can't do it. When you're faced with, it happens all the time for me. I mean, I run into problems where I don't want to move forward. For example, for me, my business, I've started my own business a couple of months ago and I'm not making any income from it. I'm having amazing conversations, but the idealized version of my business was I'd be generating income by now, and I haven't. And so of course the thoughts of, should I give this up? Should I abandon the plan and pivot to something else? All those things come up. And my personal expression of discipline is to stick with it. And I've built that discipline muscle over time in other domains of life, my finances, my physical health, how I enter and exit relationships. And so you kind of got to flex the muscle of your value over and over and over again for you to embody it and then have it just be a natural expression of yourself into the world. The values become real through behavior. And behavior is how your values are expressed. You express them through how you spend your time, where you put your energy, what you give your attention to, the things that you pursue, things that you tolerate, things that you don't tolerate. You may say that you value self-respect, but your boundaries show whether or not you're living it or not, and whether that's a real value. Your life's not necessarily an expression of the values you claim. Your life is an expression of the values you embody and express. And the values that you express, they repeatedly reveal themselves over and over and over again. If discipline is a value for you, discipline's going to show up in so many domains of life. If you say that you want to be rich, then maybe a value is financial freedom. And so your behaviors will reveal financial freedom. If you have money and you can afford to buy a brand new car, but the car you have sitting in the garage is perfectly fine to get you from point A to point B in comfort. The air conditioning works. It doesn't require a lot of maintenance. Is financial literacy buying another car and then, losing X number of thousands of dollars to that purchase, or making a monthly payment, or whatever it looks like for you? Or is it to continue to live with the car that works perfectly fine and, you're not necessarily interested in improving or proving something to other people or yourself? Some people can live according to their values when it's super easy. The real challenge is, how do you live with your values when it's actually going to cost you something? Do you hold firm or do you cave? Honesty matters when lying would be easier. Discipline matters when quitting would be easier or feel better. Courage matters when you're scared. Self-respect matters when maintaining boundaries disappoints someone else. So being selfish with your values really means asking, what choice will allow me to respect myself afterward? You can care deeply about other people. You can give your time. You can give your resources. You can listen, help, forgive, compromise. But your generosity should be an expression of your values, not an escape from the discomfort of defending them. So be unselfish with the things in your life that you're willing to give, but be selfish with the things in your life that you refuse to betray. Give freely where you can, hold firmly where you must. Be generous with what you have, but be selfish with who you're becoming. I hope this finds you well.